So Xenoblade Chronicles is one of my favorite series of all time. I love just about everything these games have to offer, and lately I've been working on a side project recapping the story for newcomers, while talking about my theories along the way, and it's given me a real appreciation for the lore and how everything throughout the game builds on one another like a bunch of Legos before shattering everything that it's built up, only to make you step back and see how clear it was from the start. It's an interesting feeling, and I can't wait to see what's coming next. Okay, maybe I can, because in like 2 days, the Aionios Moments Artbook is coming out, and I still have things I want to talk about just in case it reveals something important. So get comfortable and listen to my insane rambling about the Alien Sword games. Also, this is a spoiler warning. I will be talking about a lot of things from all the numbered games, and if you plan on playing them, this probably isn't the best video for you. Are we good? Okay. How did Nia become queen? In Xenoblade 3, Melia and Nia are the queens of Aionios, and while Melia is the high-Endian empress in one's world, Nia is just a driver from 2, so out of everyone, how is Nia the queen in 3? I personally see 3 ways of this actually happening. First, Gormat split from Mora Dane, and Nia, as the last living member of one of the Gormati lords' family, was installed as their queen. And this does have some legs to stand on, as the all-rest half of Origin was seemingly built in the skies above Gormat, but there are immediately a handful of issues with this train of thought. This route would imply that Mora Dane would do nothing to stop land that they have had some kind of claim over for 450 years, before properly assimilating it into the Empire 50 years before the game starts, from splitting off and becoming a separate nation. It would also mean that the plans to move the Empire's capital Gormat just no longer existed, which is a little far-fetched because last I checked, Mora Dane is still basically a desert, so that one's out. Next up, Praetor Rex or Nia. Other than the first one, this one is the only other way that the idea of Rex ending up with Pyra, Mithra, and Nia could really work, as neither Rex nor Nia have any claim to a throne, but maybe being Praetor could solve this. This could also explain why Agnes Castle has a similar appearance to the Praetorium, except Indol blew up, and the title of Praetor likely died with Amalthus because the world no longer needs an acting god. And that leaves the final option of Nia marrying into royalty somewhere, and there are only 2 options here. And last I checked, Nia has a kid, so Nia marries Emperor of Mora Dane, Niall. This one actually has more going for it. Like, for starters, Nia doesn't reveal that she's a blade to anyone except for Niall, though granted he was dying, or rather dead, but she also had the chance to do this for Vandam, so... Also, I do want to say that this is the weakest bit of evidence I have for this idea, but it doesn't hurt to at least mention it. Niall appears on the Xenoblade 2 and Torn of the Golden Country Celebration artwork alongside pretty much every other important character, despite sharing far less screen time compared to everyone in Torna who doesn't show up, including the main villain of the game. Melia has the title of Queen, likely from Mobius changing it, instead of Empress, which is her actual title. If Nia marries Niall, then she too would receive the title of Empress, and it too would change to Queen like Melia's did. Also perpetuating this idea of Melia and Nia having these connections, Kevis Castle is just Alchemoth covered in a black coat of paint, making it look like Hard High Palace. And coincidentally, it's placed right on top the remains of Mora Dane. Meanwhile, over in the Cadencia region, Agnes Castle color-wise looks like how Alchemoth used to, while floating over the remains of Aerith Sea, around where Prison Island used to float, right across from where Alchemoth once stood. Actually, adding on to this, if Nia married Niall and then the capital of Mora Dane was moved to Gormat, then Agnes Castle is likely the new royal palace. Oh, and Nia's great-great-granddaughter is named Niall, and we know from there being at least 2 Gondors that this family likes reusing names. What is Origin Metal? It just kind of appears in both worlds and is apparently the best material to build Origin out of, so what is it? Well, first, I feel like we need to check off a few boxes. It has to first be capable of surviving the destruction and rebirth of a universe. Second, it has to be capable of containing either great power or souls. And third, there has to be enough of it in both worlds to construct at least half of Origin. Laying it out like that, there's only really one option in each world. In one's world, the remains of the Mechonis would likely be the culprit, while 2's world contains the remains of the World Tree. We know both survive a universe reset, with the World Tree surviving the experiment, while at least the Fallen Arm and presumably the lower half of the Mechonis are transferred into the new universe when Shulk has Alvis recreate the universe. Origin was built to contain both the souls of all the people in both worlds, and the Ontos core, which is the god of one's world, and Mechonis did both. Also, I'll talk more about the Ontos god thing in a minute, but I will be continuing under the assumption that Shulk gave up his divinity to Alvis, and the world without the need for gods line meant that Alvis would serve as a passive god, even giving up his physical form and returning to his core. Anyway, Meccana contained the soul of Maynith, whom is also a god, checking off the first few boxes, but it still doesn't check off the contains something of great power thing, and that's probably where I would have left it, if there wasn't a whole other half of Origin. The World Tree was able to contain the strongest item in the series, in the form of the Conduit, and while we don't entirely know about the containing souls thing, there are a few things that could imply that it does have some connection to souls. So to make this side tangent quick, Amalthus sees his mother's spirit in his final moments, Numa hears a dead Malos in her last few moments, and the place was ground zero for the experiment where the only survivor in modern day seems to be Klaus, who has half of himself in a portal serving as a soul to an evil god. And now I digress. When the two halves linked, their capabilities likely did as well. Also, this would explain why there are different colors of Origin metal. The Mechanus was primarily black, while the World Tree was white and silver. We see that most of Origin and N's Lucky 7 is black, like the Mechanus, while the miscellaneous pieces of Origin, like Nia's Origin Cog, the piece of the Ouroboros stone at the start, possibly the hammers used by the legendary Nopon, and finally Noah's Lucky 7 is silver like the World Tree. Final thing to do with Origin metal here, at least. Interestingly, Kevis Castle is modified from its original form, becoming a similar black to Mechanus, while Agnes Castle seems to be constructed out of the same material as the World Tree's interior. If these are the origins for Origin metal, it would make sense to see how these massive buildings have survived both the destruction of a world and annihilation events occurring just about everywhere around them. Just a neat thought. So I know that there are only a handful of survivors from the previous world, but neither Pyra, Mithra, or any other blades resurfaced, despite the fact that we see the remains of Titans and presumably a core or two should have probably resurfaced somewhere. This leads me to a simple conclusion. They simply can't survive in Aionios. I think there are two options to why this could be. The first option is that the time freeze may disrupt the core crystals and prevent them from reactivating like they should after the death of their driver. The less boring option, however, is that there is seemingly little to no Cloud Sea left in Aionios, despite the photo of the Xenoblade 2 cast showing that there was still a massive expanse of clouds around New Ulrest. Titans need the Cloud Sea to build and maintain their bodies, so why wouldn't Blades, which are just the early stages of the Titan life cycle? For the rest of this, I'll kind of just be moving forward with this idea in mind, but it does beg another question. Where did all the Cloud Sea go? Well, I think that most of it directly in/near Aionios was annihilated with the merge. Some of it converted into black fog, while the remaining pockets outside the landmass were drawn to the castles and used in the cradles. Now, that's a lot to take in, so we're going to take it one by one. This photo is pretty good proof of the Cloud Sea still being around the continent, but it also shows us that bits of the Cloud Sea, in the form of fog, rest on parts of the land, as we see Gramps having just a lot of fog around him. So it makes me think that there was likely a bunch of smaller patches around and inside of the Titans conjoined to the land that was probably destroyed upon the convergence of the two worlds. Some of it then converts into black fog, likely from being caught up in a state of activation upon the time freeze. Rex compares walking through the black fog to the Cloud Sea, and while black fog is the cause of the annihilation effect, it doesn't actually destroy anything. Instead, it rebuilds all the material caught up in it into enic matter. What did the Cloud Sea do again? Oh yeah, rebuild the world little by little, deconstructing and then reconstructing matter. The black fog can also serve as a substitute for the Cloud Sea, as we see both Mobius and interlinked Ouroboros use it to form and maintain their physical bodies. Though notably, the black fog is far more unstable. If Ouroboros and or Mobius remain interlinked for an extended period of time, they will eventually become an annihilation effect. When N's core is damaged, we can actually see the black fog leaking from him, implying to me that most Mobius are made of the stuff. The only known exception to this seems to be Shania, as she is the only Mobius we see become Mobius with her original body being revived. Anyway, I also mentioned that some of the Cloud Sea does seem to be kicking with the white clouds around Kevis Castle, and patches of thick white fog everywhere near Agnes Castle. I think that these are more than just clouds and fog due to the fact that A, 2's world was literally covered in clouds, and B, Aionios is surrounded by what appears to be the same thing. Anyway, due to the existence of the Cloud Sea in these areas, what exactly would they be using it for? We do see that Mobius learned how to harness the black fog for the Annihilator by drawing it into the top of the castle, so what's to stop them from doing the same to this white fog? When the party arrives at Kevis Castle, what do we see floating around the top? White clouds amongst the black fog in a swirling pattern. When the party destroys the Annihilator and ends up in the throne room, we see a brand new batch of soldiers, so recent that Ethel, somebody who died anywhere from a few hours to a day or so prior to that moment, being found amongst them. At the start of the game, we see how soldiers are made by injecting a foggy gas into the liquid within the cradles and just kind of poofing into existence. While we can't see what color the gas actually is, I would wager that due to its opaque nature and the Cloud Sea's ability to create bodies for Titans, and possibly blades, tells me that Mobius basically retooled the functions of the Cloud Sea to, instead of making Titan bodies, make human bodies to place the souls from Origin into. This would actually explain a bit more than I thought going into this. Like, how exactly are Agnians getting core crystals? Well, if they're made in the same way that the Titans are made, they can just poof core crystals into existence for them. Why do soldiers become husks when they die? Well, Titans are rocky creatures that become more stone-like when they die, as shown with the decaying Titan that makes up the Cliffs of Moratha. They even only turn to stone when their life is stolen, and the soul is removed to go chill back in Origin. So I may have just accidentally stumbled on the answers of how the soldiers work while trying to explain the disappearance of blades. Oh, right, the blades. Okay, so before I get back on track, let's actually take a step back and explain how I think this works. The castle sucks the black and white fogs in at the same time. The black fog was originally discarded before the Annihilator was built, while the white was injected into the cradles, where it rearranges the liquid inside to form a sort of Titan-adjacent body, making a core crystal if needed, and then placing the soul into the body, and allowing it to become a soldier. The soldiers are then harvested for their embers of life. When they are killed and the embers disappear from their bodies, they transform into stone, similar to how a decaying Titan would become more stone-like. As for how Off-Seeing fits in, I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, back to blades finally. If they can't just maintain a physical form due to no Cloud Sea, then where are the cores? Well, I think there could be a few locations. The first is that they aren't seen as anything special anymore and now serve as the base gemstones for the gems the party equip, as they don't seem to be made of the same ether crystals as the ones that appear in Xenoblade 1. But I think a more interesting idea is that the cores were buried over the 1,000 or so years Aionios existed, and we can find their burial sites in the form of the ether spheres for Ino's high ether. To me, this feels right as an explanation for what happened to the core crystals. It would explain why the ether spheres are golden, since when blades reach max affinity with their drivers, their ether changes from blue to gold. Enemies swarm around and are attracted to it, with it enhancing their abilities as well as Ino's, not too dissimilar to how a blade sending their ether to a driver enhances them. And there are a lot more things I could talk about regarding this, but it's getting harder to explain my thoughts, so I'll end this section off with saying that the normal ether channels are the last remnants of the blood of the Bionis. Okay, next topic! Okay, so this section is everything else I want to talk about, and it will be a bit more rapid fire, just because I want to get this video out before the Artbook, and while these are mostly connected, I just can't figure out how to connect all these thoughts coherently. So here's a little dinger, and I will basically hit it up every time I start talking about something new. Alright, it works. Blades are the result of everyone being in Origin's giant core crystals, and are the same thing as Xenoblade 2 style blade weapons. Nia demonstrates this with both her and the Ouroboros members being able to summon her blade weapon from 2. This, in a way, just makes all blades an extension of the user. Noah, Mio, N, and M share the same blades, though in somewhat different forms. To me, this can tell us that the unique weapons are sort of a true form, reflective of what their weapons are meant to look like without having Mobius interfering and placing the generic weapons on the soldiers. The blade system in 3 is a derivative of the blade system in 2, which is why Ouroboros, beings who use a small amount of Numa's power, can replicate and use the weapons of others, because Numa granted her driver the ability to resonate with any blade. Ouroboros itself is based partially off of Pyra and Mithra. The first ones we see are the Kavesi ones, who possess a combination of black and red making up their main colors, while Agnian ones use white and black as their main colors, with the red taking much more of a backseat in their forms. They can then swap between forms to serve many different situations that the others just couldn't, similar to how Pyra and Mithra swap. This actually makes me wonder if there could be a third kind of Ouroboros that is both interlinking partners in control at the same time. Also, the idea of interlinking in and of itself seems to be related to the idea of Numa being both Pyra and Mithra simultaneously. I feel like this one should be clear, but Nia didn't create Ouroboros. It is a result of Numa power resonating with Origin Metal. Nia, however, does make the Ouroboros stones, and probably made a bunch before sealing herself away, and the one we see in the base game is just one of the last ones to be found. Or the alternative is that she only made one more, and the one the main party is powered up by is the last one. Red in most swords seem to be a way of showing the presence of Numa within the blade. Not a literal version of her, physically her core is likely in the Cloud Keep in this thing because, well, just look at it, and then look at this glow from the core. I think we're pretty much all smart enough to put two and two together on this one. Red in weapons, though, is likely a similar thing to Ouroboros' connection to Numa. The only exception to this appears to be Shulk and A, but both are using Monados. One is using an Ontos Monado, and the other is replicating the Ontos Monado. Anyway, I think we can go a bit further on this, but I'll get there in a second. With this in mind, though, we have 3 people with red in their blades, and we know of at least 2 being able to use the Numa power, so Gondor here is probably not trying as hard as she should be. Or rather, she doesn't have Origin Metal, but you know. Mobius weapons also seem to work in a similar way, but with Logos. Zed, however, is able to provide some weapons with Origin permissions, hence why X is able to restrict the party with the blade that Zed provided her. Noah was chosen to wield some power from both Logos and Numa because his emotions were above all others. Also, his intense Mobius feelings are likely what resulted in his original sheath for the Black Lucky 7 resembling a Mobius weapon even before he became Mobius. Noah's powers are based off of Shulk and Rex in a few different ways. Base Noah has two of Shulk's arts in the form of the Shadow Eye and Air Slash, as well as shares the Infinity Blade name with both Rex's Hidden New Game Plus level 4 special with Numa, as well as his future redeemed talent art. His sword goes from red to white/silver, and then a more Monado-esque third form. While using the Unsheathed Lucky 7, his arts all have symbols similar to and even identical to those found on the Monado. As Ouroboros, he wields two swords and can even perform Rolling Smash and Mega Spinning Edge, which, at least name-wise, appears to be a reference to Rex's double spinning edge. Also like Rex, most of his unique powers come from the Numa core. Also regarding Noah, his sword works in a pretty neat way. Lucky 7 on its own should be powerful. Its Origin Metal has the souls of the Xenoblade 1 party, is seemingly a Monado replica, but it appears to require energy to resonate with. The sword on its own is just a sword, but both Noah and N are able to charge the weapon with some power from their sheaths. Both sheaths seem to possess a connection to a Trinity core, and can sort of remotely charge the weapon without the need for the physical core. Rex's Firelight swords may give us a hint to how Pyra and Mithra worked, after they were both given separate bodies. Rex likely dual-wielded their blades in 2's world, and the ability to recombine the Firelight swords may hint at the idea that interlinking was a Pyra and Mithra thing, using it to temporarily reform Numa if needed. The combined sword is an equivalent to the third sword, and is even shown to spew out the same Aegis green light that the original did. I don't really see a reason why the Firelight swords would just have an ability like that if the originals didn't. I mean, like, the Monado Rex maintained pretty much all of the same functionalities it had in Future Connected, so it's kind of where the idea sprouted from. If this is the case though, how does Mobius use that power? Well, they seem to derive their strength from Logos, and when his core was damaged, he stole data from Pyra's to repair himself. What if in this situation, he also stole the interlinking data in the Numa core? Actually would give him double meaning to this line.
Look what you've been hiding away.
As while we know he is just referring to Ion, he could have also been referring to interlinking, as he not only seemingly absorbed Spirit Pyra, but the first thing Pyra and Mithra do once they recover is transform into Numa. Kinda like the data was fresh, though this is more of just a neat thought, I guess. Rex, Shulk, and Zed are right where the Ontos portal formed. Rex and Shulk already have their weapons summoned before Alpha even releases a shockwave, and we learn that the three only formed a truce once Alpha appeared. It makes me wonder if Shulk and Rex were in the middle of fighting Zed, and Alpha only appears just to prevent them from allowing the old life from the original worlds to be able to just persist and return to normalcy. Because, you know, his plan is literally restart the life cycle with the new people, so Origin was based off of the Ontos core and seemingly has three functions. The first is to house the actual Ontos core and provide it commands. The second is to emulate the functions of the missing Logos core and provide the disembodied Logos energy released upon Malice's death a body to inhabit once again, hence the purple energy flowing throughout Origin. And the third is to rebuild the worlds once they are destroyed. To make it all work, each core would need an administrator to take Klaus's place as the admin of the Trinity processors. Administrators possess a small amount of power from the Trinity processor they are tied to, while also being provided a great deal of control of Origin. For Numa, the administrator is Nia, Logos is Melia, and Origin itself would serve as the Ontos administrator, acting as a sort of terminal to give Ontos manual commands. However, everything goes wrong with the activation of Origin. Seemingly, people's fear of the future takes hold over Origin, resonating with the Logos energy and creating Zed. Zed then prevents the total activation of Origin and freezes time. This interrupting of the Origin messes with the Ontos core, sort of like turning off a computer during updates. And it corrupts Ontos, creating Alpha. Alpha gets injured, blah 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 blah, and then he needs an avatar. Avatars are beings that draw on a large amount of the Trinity core's power, granting them insane levels of power. For Logos, the feelings of fear within Origin took shape as Zed, becoming an avatar. Numa used Rex, and Ontos intended for Shulk. Ontos showed up to Shulk in one's world, pretty much in the same way that he later does to Niall on a beach while the individual's alone. Shulk, though, picked up the core in a state where Alvis was very likely still intact, while Niall finds the core in a corrupted state, seemingly running off of Zanza's final command to his Trinity, restart the life cycle. Back over to Numa and Rex. Rex's life force was reignited by Pyra. He was Numa's driver. His blades are just modified versions of the Aegis swords. He is shown to be constantly stronger than every other party member, even blocking an attack from Alpha's true form, something that literally nobody else could do. Up until the ending, he is the only one shown using Numa's green energy. And when he taps into the Ouroboros power, it takes on the same color as reaching max affinity with a blade. For all intents and purposes, Rex is Numa's avatar. Logos is able to just do people's fears because, well, he's more or less exists within Origin just like those feelings. So it's kind of in a way just choosing part of yourself to be your own avatar, which is kind of neat, but that's really how I would describe that. And finally, I don't actually think the art book will talk about most of this, and especially this part, but I think our next main game protagonist will probably be Mithra's kid. This child would have a connection back to Aegis like every other protagonist does. Since this is the start of a new arc, why not start off with another blonde protagonist? They also went out of their way to show the other kids from this photo, and even ones that weren't even in this photo, looking at you. So I think that we'll see this third child as a main game protagonist, eventually. Maybe not in 4 directly, but you never know. Anyway, if you sat through all that, thanks. Here's a statistic, and I hope to see you in another video when I actually get around to making one. Bye!